Oh, and welcome to the Arsenal Transfer Show. Every single morning for you on the Gooner Talk at 8 a.m. It is an absolute pleasure to join you as always. Thank you for doing so. It's great. It's great to see you. It's great to have you with me. It's great to have a chat about the Arsenal as always. This community continues to be a fantastic thing and to show the reasons why I do what I do. So thank you as always for tuning in. You've been an incredible amount of support. There's been stuff going on that I'm going to be able to talk about very, very soon, actually on Monday, about kind of a situation going forwards. But yeah, the last 2 months, as I've mentioned to you, as I've mentioned on a number of shows, kind of has taken a real hit to me. Some people know what's been going on, some people don't, and hopefully I'm going to be able to talk about that and a lot more on Monday. But there's been obviously some significant changes in my life and some significant turnarounds in my life recently as well that I can't wait to speak to you about, because I think an example actually of doing what you think is the right thing and going forwards and putting the effort in to try and do what needs to be done. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that next week. But I just wanted to start off today's show as the weekend begins by saying a massive thank you to you guys, to the community, because what you've helped me to create here, what you've helped by supporting me through some really, really difficult times is really enlightening. So thank you for that. Thank you for those that tuned into yesterday's phone-in show. Thank you for yesterday's show, which kind of looked at a little bit different of a topic. I tackled I think what was a really difficult topic to kind of, sometimes you've got to put your head above the parapet, if you like. And you're going to end up taking stick for it. You're going to end up taking some scrutiny for it because we obviously talk about news each day, but I have seen just on social media, like what's been talked about, what's been spread around about Mikel Arteta, and obviously the amount of money that he's been spent. So we talked about that yesterday. We talked about the 700 million taglines, which obviously aren't true. That he'd spent supposedly £100 million more than actually what has been spent, and we had a really good phone-in show. So thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for continuing to support us and for tuning into those shows. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. A1, Matt G, Damien, John, good morning to you, to Barry, to Old Dave, to Franklin, to Stevie, Temi, good morning to Matt Tomo and Stephen Paul, Jose, AB, NSW, Jorgen, Matt G, Peter, Martin, other Martin, Amira, Arsenal for Life, Guna76, Stephen, Louis, Josh, Franklin, Goodwin, Rejected Billionaire, World Citizen, Darren, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you so much for the support, and everybody else as well. It really is. Temi, no, I'm not leaving the show at all. Don't worry, the show is going nowhere. It's things in a wider sphere. I've been having some challenges with mental health and things off camera. So I needed a win this week, and that certainly came. So thank you for that. Let's crack on with today's story, shall we? Premier League action is here. And yesterday we saw Burnley and Luton take part in the first round of what is the kind of split Premier League game week. We have some games taking place today and tomorrow, but the rest of the games will not be taking place until next week. Of course, Arsenal's game against Crystal Palace is one of those fixtures. So I'd recommend going and checking that out. Because it's going to be an exciting game that we need to make sure that we win that game. Otherwise, it is going to be really genuinely a meltdown period. But we've got today Chelsea against Fulham, really interesting West London derby, and then of course a very important game for Arsenal's title race hopes. Newcastle host Manchester City, a game in which last season delivered 6 goals in quite the thriller at St James's Park. So will we see a repeat of last season? I think Arsenal will be hoping to see points dropped for Man City, but Newcastle haven't necessarily had the best of time lately, of course. And they're certainly in a position in which they'll be hoping to try and pick up points to the best of their ability as they chase down European qualification spots. And then tomorrow, which I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow, about Everton, Villa and Manchester United against Tottenham. Now, Arsenal's under-21s beat Aston Villa last night. We had a goal from Ismail Kabia, 18-year-old winger you may not have heard of so far. It was his first start playing for the under-21s in his entire career, I think, unless I've got that wrong. But but I think it was his first start for Arsenal's under-21s. He's 18 years of age, and in his first start, he scored his goal to give Arsenal a 1-0 win, which is, I think, maybe he scored the week before, but I'm pretty sure. This game against against Middlesbrough is his first game. I think he came on the week before. But you may notice also something on the screen in the subs bench. You can see there in the subs Chido-Obi Martin as well. If you remember, he is the guy that famously scored 10 goals against Liverpool's youth team. It's great to see him on the bench for the under-21s. He's still 16 years of age. And a really obviously exciting talent. He came on in the game against Villa, only had a few minutes of action, but he did come on earlier in the season as well against Brighton in a 6-3 win for the under-21. So he's making his impact. He's progressing through the ranks. He's getting those chances. That's really, really good to see. And it seems Arsenal have got some amazing talent in their teenage ranks to try and supplement, I guess, the senior side going forward. So that's going to be really, really interesting. Marquinhos has been recalled from his loan spell with Nantes. Obviously, we know that he wasn't particularly having a great time out in France. He barely played for the French side this season. And he'd obviously been playing with the Pan America Games for the Brazil youth side as well. He's actually returned and he's going to be going off straight away during this winter break. He's going to be playing for Brazil's under-23s during their Olympic pre-tournaments as well. So I think that Marquinhos and his future is difficult. I spoke to someone close to the club yesterday who told me that there's been no decision taken yet with the player. All options remain open. He could return from his time with the Brazil youth side and be reintegrated into the under-21s for the rest of this season. He could go out on loan if there's another option that returns during this window. He could yet be sold. A team could come in and Arsenal wouldn't necessarily stop that from happening if the right figure is brought forwards. I'm told that any option is on the table at the moment for Marquinhos as we try and sort out the next stage of his career with or without Arsenal Football Club. Now, Joao Palhinha's agent has been saying and talking to, I think, Plettergol, Florian Pletterberg of Sky Germany, talking about Joao Palhinha's situation. And the expectation is that he will not move during this winter window. Of course, the player has been linked with a move to Arsenal. It's been linked with a move to Bayern Munich and a number of other clubs as well. But there is no expectation, no matter the interest from any of these clubs, that he will leave during the January transfer window. It is expected that Joao Palhinha will indeed stick around with Fulham at least until the summer. He has signed that brand new deal after that very close call with the move to Bayern last summer, but the expectation is that he will indeed stay during this window. And a headline story, if you like, AFC Amden on Twitter, very well connected account, saying yesterday that Arsenal expect to sign Ivan Toney in the summer. Big calls being made, big claims coming out. And we know that Arsenal see Ivan Toney as one of their key players and key potential signings. But the full tweet read by AFC Amden is that Arsenal expect to sign Toney in the summer if all goes to plan with his comeback in the next 6 months. Arteta is keen to sign a Premier League proven forward who is English, with the expectation that a few homegrown players will depart in the summer, remaining open to an opportunity during this window. We expect that Arsenal will push for homegrown players. Of course, we've got Smith Rowe, Nketiah, Nelson, Ramsdale could all leave the club, and so it makes sense that they would target English players. How much they might want for Toney in the summer is a question mark, because of course he'll have 1 year left on his contract with Brentford. He'll be, I think, 28 years of age by that point as well. So how much they will expect for Ivan Toney remains to be seen. 100 million is the price tag in January, but how much they'll expect for Toney in the summer transfer window, I guess we'll have to remain patient on that. Of course, I've had my reservations about this deal. You know my thoughts on this. I think that Arsenal maybe could target somebody better. But there's no doubt that whenever Arsenal sign a player, we give them our full backing and undivided support and hope that they succeed, and hope that in particular they prove me wrong if this turns out to be the player that Arsenal end up moving for. Now, of course, there is still an opportunity for you guys to get a ticket for the latest Football Prizes competition, which is a amazing one. A signed and framed mount of 23 members of the Arsenal undefeated 2003-2004 squad, including Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, Dennis Bergkamp, Robert Pires, and Freddie Ljungberg as well. Arsene Wenger's signature there. An amazing prize. Link in the description. So far, checking the screen, over 300 tickets have been sold, and there's just over 150 left, according to this. So don't miss out on your chance. There's 4 days left on this raffle prize. Link in the description. Make sure you check out Football Prizes for all the rest of the opportunities to win some great things. There's some instant win prizes as well in this. There's 14 of them, which includes signed shirts from Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp as well. So just by buying a ticket, you enter yourself into a raffle for those if they've not already been won. So do make sure you get involved. Link, as I say, is down in the description. Okay, shall we move to part 2 and your questions right after this? Okay, let's jump into the chat box and go through some of your questions for today's show, shall we? Matt G says, Tom, Arteta and Salt Bay discuss. Oh, my goodness me. You really can't, can like, we're sadly gonna see a lot of criticism for this. And to be fair, Arteta's really given his critics the ammunition, hasn't he? He's really given his critics the ammunition. He is an unbelievable manager, but my goodness me, the choices here that were made, maybe not the best, especially to post it on your socials as well. I know people are gonna have an absolute field day with this one. Look, in my view, maybe posting it was the wrong idea, but he's entitled to do what he wants. He's got his own spare and free time, so he can do what he wants with it. But I wouldn't have done that. I'm just saying. But yeah, very, very amusing. Matt says, what are your thoughts on the split game week? I'm a fan. I think it's a really smart way to get players their much needed rest while also keeping the football going for the fans. Matt, I think you sum it up really well. I think we still get football over the course of 2 weekends. It gives a weekend off for Premier League players and for Premier League clubs. And so therefore, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great opportunity to give those players a rest, and that's really, really important. Charles says, morning, Tom. Is it just me? Every time I see Havertz at left centre mid, I feel like Arsenal is playing with 10 men for 70 minutes. He does so little progressively, just basic stuff compared to Xhaka. I think, Charles, the misconception people have is that Havertz was signed to replace Xhaka. For me, he wasn't. I believe Declan Rice and Thomas Partey were, of course, meant to be those key players in the midfield. And then Martin Odegaard with the creativity ahead of them. But because of Partey's injury and because of Zinchenko's injury at the start of the season, the way in which we shifted the defence around a bit with the situations we had going on, Partey was in that back four in a hybrid role. So we didn't get to see it. But I agree in the sense that I think his best position lies outside of the midfield. I wouldn't be starting him at left centre midfield if it was up to me. I think the right way forwards is to not do that, basically. So I agree with you. Bulgarian Gooner Drago says, do you think Brentford will lower their price in the summer, say from 100 million to 60 to 65? Potentially, but ultimately, if there's a bidding war, they don't need to. You know, if you've got Chelsea coming in, if you've got Arsenal coming in, you know that they're going to be both having opportunities to try and succeed. You know, I think that will help Brentford. That helps their cause. That helps their opportunity to try and to get a higher figure. But it will depend upon how many clubs come in for him, I think, during that window. If only one club come in, they might end up being able to negotiate a lower figure. But obviously, think about the Declan Rice deal. We've got a situation where Arsenal were bidding at the start. West Ham were saying no because they knew that Man City were there and interested, and eventually Man City did come in. And that pushed up the price to what we had to pay. If Arsenal were the only team going in for Declan Rice in that summer window, we may have been able to succeed in getting that deal done for a lower figure. But Man City's involvement changed things. So if Arsenal going for Toney and Chelsea going for Toney, or someone else comes in for Toney, then that ultimately might change things for Arsenal. And the price tag. Jonas Loffing says, or Loffing, I hope I pronounced that correctly. As a Swede, it's interesting hearing the talk about Gyökeres. Had a breakdown in the national team last year. It could be useful. Breakthrough, is that meant to? Yeah, breakthrough. I didn't mean breakdown. Had a breakdown in the national team. Could be useful. Do you remember the last Swede that we had at Arsenal, Tom? I'm trying to think if there was one after Ljungberg. Olsen. We had a youth player called Olsen, who went on to play, I think, for the Swedish national side after Ljungberg. Kim Kallström, he was Swedish, right? I'm pretty sure. Any other Swedes? Trying to think if there's any other Swedes that I can think of. But Amanda Alstedt, of course. You got to think about the women's team as well. But I'm trying to think if there's any more that I can think of that have been. Lena Hurtig as well, Stina Blackstenius. They're all coming to me now, but they're in the women's team, of course. Sebastian Larsson was one of the young guys. Yeah, he came through and then obviously went to Sunderland for spending most of his career. So, yeah, we've had Swedes at the club and have got Swedes at the club. And maybe, as Bulgarian Gooner here says, we might get Swedes at the club because Alexander Isak is a potential exit from Newcastle. Newcastle in a bit of financial bother because, of course, they're trying to adhere to their own profit and sustainability rules. Because of that, Isak Isak is one of those players that they could get a lot of money for. If it was up to me, I'd rather choose between Toney Isak. I'm choosing Isak personally. I know he's had his injury issues, I suppose, but the age profile I think is better. And that Premier League consistency he's been playing in the league this season, I'd love to see Isak arrive at Arsenal. That'd be a great move. Lee says, Tom, confidence plays a massive factor in a player's mindset. If the goals start flowing, then I believe performances will improve and results will be where we want them to be. And I think that confidence is, we talked about this on the other show the other day, didn't we? Confidence, mentality. We talked about the fact that we need momentum, and at the moment we're struggling to get that. Rich says, Tom, I'm confused about the homegrown rule. I thought we needed 8 players trained in the country, of whom 4 trained at the club. If Nketiah and Smith Rowe leave us, signing Toney won't replace them. No, so the homegrown rule works. You're allowed 17 non-homegrown players in your squad. Is what you're allowed. So you need, of your 25-man squad, at least 8 homegrown players, basically, unless they're going to change it. There's been suggestions that they might increase or decrease the non-homegrown quota, and so players that were at the club or playing in England for at least 3 years before the ages of 21, to my understanding, count as homegrown. Now, Ivan Toney came through at Northampton Town in their youth career. He went to Newcastle, of course, went on loan a lot of times before he ended up at Peterborough, and then, of course, now at Brentford. And he would be homegrown. Ivan Toney is a homegrown player, so Toney would indeed replace the exits of the likes of Smith Rowe or Nketiah in our homegrown. But it's not, you have to remember, it's the other way around. So we don't have a homegrown quota, we have a non-homegrown quota, and we can register 17 non-homegrown players in our group. I hope that explains it. Steve says, why are you talking about potential signings every day when you told Dan Potts that we're not buying anyone in January? Because, Steve, that's the rumours, and it's a news show. We talk about the news every single day, and if there's rumours of stories, we talk about the transfers, Steve. But look, Potts had his show yesterday. I know he went over onto Troops' channel yesterday as well, just for the records, to kind of clear up some of the things that were and were not said. So I think Dan may have misconstrued what I said on his show. When we talked about Eddie Nketiah in particular, which I know was mentioned on Troops' channel, I said that Eddie Nketiah is the Lacazette replacement, in the sense of Lacazette was the backup number 2 striker behind Aubameyang, and now Nketiah is the number 2 striker behind Gabriel Jesus. It's just, that's just the state of player where we are. If it was up to me, I'd rather we replaced Eddie Nketiah and brought somebody else in that was better. I think I've been pretty clear about that and consistent about that on the channel, of course, as well. So yeah, I just hope that clears up that little thing there. But yeah, because we talk about potential signings. I don't think we'll sign anyone, Steve, to be honest. I really don't. I'd be very surprised. If anything, it'll be a very cheap deal, or it'll be a loan, because at the moment, financially, we are very restricted, Steve, by the financial limits that we have on the club because of the profit and sustainability rules. So that's why. We talk about the rumors that are out there, we talk about the stories that are there, but ultimately, as I've said and been very consistent about, I don't think that we will sign anyone. Pika who says, Tom, could we potentially buy Raya? So then it allows us to loan Toney so we can see how it does and then buy in the summer. No, because the price tag is still going to be £100 million for Ivan Toney, isn't it? So because it's going to be £100 million, if you buy Raya, that loan is still going to have an agreement of a huge sum. And also, Brentford have said that they're not selling. They're not selling in this window. They're not letting him leave. And Tony has come out and said he's very much looking to fight for his place at Brentford. So there's not an expectation that will change. Temi says, Tom, are you aware that Crystal Palace's bid for Eddie was neither accepted nor rejected? Sometimes you don't even respond to bids, Temi. Sometimes bids aren't accepted or rejected. I don't know that to be true, by the way. But certainly I think that, any suggestions of the numbers that I've been heard of, I don't think Arsenal would even consider at this stage. I think there's going to have to increase those potential inquiries quite significantly. Bagama says, what is a profit and sustainability rule? We've gone through this a few times. So just in short, Premier League clubs are measured over a 3-year period. At the moment, that period is from 2023 through to 2025. The last one was from 2019 through to 2022. They included that in a 4-year bracket because the COVID years were combined from 2020 to 2021 as an average. So what happens is after those 3 years, you're monitored over those. You have to submit your finances after those 3 years. And you must have not made a loss of 5 million in each of those years. You can extend that loss. That loss can be extended to around £35 million, depending on different scenarios. So across the 3 years, that loss would be £105 million. If you breach that, if you breach these profit and sustainability rules, you can be subject to points deductions, as we have seen through Everton this season. They have received a points deduction. And there are a number of clubs, supposedly, that, like Nottingham Forest, I've seen Wolves mentioned in this, that are apparently skirting around quite close to that. And Arsenal, of course, have got their own concerns because we've sadly not been able to sell players well enough, but we haven't really had the resources of players. Like you think about when Klopp arrived at Liverpool, you know, they just sold Luis Suarez, they then sold Coutinho. You think about clubs like Chelsea that have had a numerous loan players go out on loan, constantly playing, never getting any minutes of the first team and then selling them. Arsenal, sadly, when Arteta arrived, had a squad that was broken and we couldn't really make too much money from the player sales. So we've had to really be careful about our spending. So there you go. Matt G says, Tom, why are you talking about Arsenal news on an Arsenal news show? I see what you're saying, Matt. But look, Steve's entitled to answer the question, which I hope I've provided a good enough answer to. Let's go to LMS. Says, Tony will have a year left on his deal in the summer, his age. So going over for 60 million wouldn't make any sense. I would tend to agree. I wouldn't pay any more than 60 million in the summer for Ivan Toney. Young King says, you mentioned yesterday that Liverpool's title had an asterisk next to it. Do you think people look at Arteta's FA Cup in the same way? It's a really good question, actually. I guess probably less so because he's a manager that came in, inherited that broken, fractured dressing room and went on to win an FA Cup against Chelsea in the final, of course. Beating Manchester City in the semi-final was a brilliant achievement. But I guess some people would. Yeah, I guess some people would probably put an asterisk next to that as well because it was during those COVID periods. Like we had to go to Sheffield United and there were no fans in that ground, and Sheffield United would have been in that season having a fantastic campaign. So maybe it would have been a trickier test. I don't know, but it's certainly worth asking the question. Bizarre says, Tom, why don't you like Nketiah? I do. I like Nketiah as a guy. I think he's a great lad, but in regards to kind of where Arsenal are at, I just don't think that. I don't think that if you're looking at Arsenal moving forwards, that Eddie Nketiah is going to be the guy that takes Arsenal to that next step. And just from what I've seen, from watching him, I can't see it. So, it's nothing personal. It's just on the footballing level. I feel like for Arsenal to be a team that can compete with Manchester City, we need to be in a position where we've got nines that are competing with the same or as close to the level of Manchester City as well. HP says, all Arsenal needs is a real number 9, like Kolo Moani. Now, Colin Moani is a player, of course, that Arsenal were looking at and were watching when he was at Frankfurt, but he moved to PSG in the summer for a big amount of money, like 80 odd million pounds, I think he ended up moving for. And they spent 80 million odd pounds on Colin Moani. He scored 4 Liga goals this season in 12 games. He's got 10 goals across all competition, which includes the Champions League, a goal in the Bundesliga before he left, and in the Bundesliga Cup as well, or the DFB Pokal, UEFA European Conference League qualifiers. Coupe de France, he's got 2 goals in 1 game for that competition, and in the Trophy de Champion, he's played a game but no goals. But 4 goals in 12 Liga matches. I'm not sure that he's turned out to be as good as I certainly thought. And that's the thing, is that you can be really attached to a player that you think Arsenal should sign. I've been there in the past, with players that I really thought that we should go for. And they've turned out not to be up to scratch. They've turned out not to be as good as what I thought they would be. And, I'm not perfect. And I'm not going to get everything right. There's players I'd like us to sign. There's players that I'm not as keen on. Ivan Toney, for instance, could come in and absolutely smash it. And I'd have to hold my hands up and say, you know what, I got that one wrong, and I've been wrong before. So it's all about making sure that you have the humbleness, if you like, the humility, that's the word, to hold your hands up if you get it wrong. Colin Moani, I don't know yet. I think Colin Moani is still a really good player that's got some really good potential. I think that he's versatile enough that he could offer you different things in different positions, but at the moment the jury would definitely be out. If we'd have spent that Havertz money on Colin Moani and a little bit more, I think we'd probably be at the moment asking similar questions as well, because he's only got 4 goals, and Havertz is, I think, in the Premier League, he's got 4 goals as well. Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, Luton. Yeah, he's got 4 goals as well in the Premier League. Unique says, Tom, who would you like us to sign? In this window, it's as I say, it's really hard. There could be scenarios in which Arsenal can take advantage of financial problems with other clubs. For instance, I did a piece at the start of the month looking at Everton and looking at Nottingham Forest and looking at 3 players that I think maybe would be good deals for Arsenal, if indeed that Arsenal can get them on the cheap, if Everton and Nottingham Forest are in the situation where they might need to sell players, for example. So that might be something Arsenal could look at as an opportunity. But again, it's difficult to know, because we don't really know specifically the amount of money that Arsenal have to spend. What we do know is that they can't sign a major player during this window. So, like Amadou Onana, for instance, I think I included him in the piece, actually. He's still being spoken about at like 50 odd million quid, which Arsenal, I just can't see how they're going to spend that much money. I think I talked about Morgan Gibbs-White being another one. If Nottingham Forest do need to sell, Morgan Gibbs-White is a fantastic homegrown player as an attacking option that would add, I think, depth to this squad. He's done well since moving there. But again, they're going to have to sell him for a significant fee. I don't know if we're going to have that amount of money. The question mark is always around. Whilst we can make these suggestions about what Arsenal should do, who I would like them to sign, ultimately, it's very, very difficult to know whether or not that Arsenal are going to be able to stump up the money. But in the summer, obviously things are different. In the summer, Arsenal, again, that it's a bit more relaxed. We'll know how much money we would have got from the Champions League and the revenue from commercial deals, etc., and any potential sales. I think we've got a big summer of selling still to go. A big summer of selling still to go. So yeah, certainly there's potential here. There's real potential for Arsenal to, well, hopefully improve the squad to a level that we can then compete even better than we have done this and obviously in last season too. Striker-wise, Osimhen, if you can go and get him, go and get him. But it's, again, another 100 million plus, to spend on a player. And that's a big amount of money. And then can Arsenal do other business? Because we need other players as well. The process, the building of this squad is not complete. £590 million spent so far. That is not going to build you a squad in the Premier League that's going to beat Man City. And that's why more is needed. And we need to do more to try and close that gap. Bizarre says, why can't we exchange Vlahovic and Nketiah at Juventus? Because I don't think they want to sell Vlahovic. I'm not sure that they want Nketiah. So it's all well and good saying, why can't we do that? The answer is because I don't think it's possible. Is the answer. B-Max says, do you think Havertz would be better up front if Saka and Martinelli swapped positions? Their crosses would be more suited to him. I think that Havertz is better suited in the forward positions. Get him out of the midfield for me. I think we just need to get Havertz out of that midfield three, from my view. I think the best you're going to get from Havertz is seeing them in the box, as close to and as in the box as feasibly possible. And on our transitions, I want urgency. I want something more. And we are lacking Xhaka, obviously. Xhaka's absence is being felt, definitely. But for me, our best 11 doesn't include Havertz. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. Should Arsenal's £65 million investment get into our starting 11? Probably. And that's why we're having a big discussion about whether or not it was the right decision to make. That said, Man City have spent 100 million on Grealish and don't necessarily start him every week. They've spent 80 odd million on Guardiola and he doesn't necessarily start every week either. They spent 50 odd million on Calvin Phillips. He certainly doesn't start every week, so that I suppose is something to be said about what happens when you spend big money at the top of the table, is that you spend big money on players that aren't necessarily always going to start for you. So that's worth pointing out. And Gerald says, look how much better as a team we play when Kai is up top. And this is what I did. I wrote that piece about Kai Havertz against Liverpool, breaking down his performance against the Reds in the FA Cup. And the performance overall was good. His movement was good. It was the finishing that was really lacking. If he scored a goal or two, we'd be talking about that display very, very differently for very obvious reasons. And if you look at the positions that Kai got into, there was that brilliant moment where Reece Nelson slid in, won the ball back, played it to Ødegaard. And if Ødegaard plays the ball in front of Havertz, he's in a one-on-one situation with Alisson. But he played the ball behind him, and so Havertz has to spin. And by that time, Konate's caught up for him, and Quansah's caught up to him, and he's then, pushing the ball wide because he's got to try and get himself in a better position. The other situation, the second half, ball over the top from Saliba. Saka's running down the right-hand side. Havertz is free in the middle. The cross doesn't come. Saka traps the ball, doesn't look up, doesn't see his player, doesn't execute the cross. Again, it would have been another situation of Havertz being one-on-one with Alisson. So I think that the performance was good. The movement was good. It was encouraging. But obviously, the situations we had, the header he had from that corner, he's got to score that. It's not acceptable to miss that type of opportunity. You have to score. And other than that, it was an encouraging display. But for £65 million, people are right to ask the question. That's for sure. Lois says, or Louis rather, do Arsenal have money for transfers at the moment? I don't think so. Linking Arsenal to Victor Osimhen and Ivan Toney is not realistic at all, except that you want to have a problem with FFP. And that's the thing. We have money for transfers. That's never been in doubt. Arsenal have money. Arsenal have one of the richest owners in the world that has invested 590 million in this squad since Arteta took over. I think we've invested close, I think since 2018, you're looking at a spend of close to 700 to 800 million pounds from Unai Emery's time at the club. So if Unai Emery's in that summer of 2018, we signed Torreira, Leno, Socrates, Lichtsteiner, of course. I think there's someone else as well that I'm forgetting in that with Guendouzi. And then the summer after in 2019, we signed Pepe and Tierney and Saliba. And so you add that to the 590, and suddenly I think we're around 850, about 850, £900 since they took full ownership of the club. So they've spent money and they've got money. The problem is that we're in a situation where now it doesn't matter if you've got money. I mean, look at Newcastle, for instance. They're a great example. Newcastle have got the richest owners in the world. They can't sign players because of the profit and sustainability rules. And I get people's frustrations. I do. I really get people's frustrations I get people's frustrations specifically about the idea of Big Six clubs have benefited from this because they've been able to spend more money back in the day. And there's an argument there. There's an argument that Man City were able to spend huge amounts of money before this stuff come in, and clubs that want to spend money now, that have got new owners now, can't spend because these rules are in place. And technically that is gatekeeping the biggest clubs. That said, you still got to spend smartly. Look at Chelsea. All you need to do is look at Chelsea, or you look at Manchester United. If you don't spend smartly, you're not going to be up at the top. But I don't think Newcastle... I can empathise with Newcastle fans who have been excited about the fact that they've got a lot of money now coming in and they can spend it, and now they might have to sell a key player because they have to keep in line with profit and sustainability rules. Whereas you look at the club that Man City have built, you look at the team that Liverpool have built, you look at the team that Chelsea have built, and they've been able to do all those things despite the fact that these rules weren't necessarily in place at the time when they started to make those constructions. So I empathise with it. It's also important always to see, Louis, when you see FFP, this is not FFP. We're not talking about FFP. FFP is different. FFP is a UEFA thing. Profit and sustainability is a Premier League regulation. That's the word. So they are separate. They are different things. Because FFP is kind of used as an umbrella term, isn't it, at times? But it is different. So it is important to make that differentiation between the two. Harish says, I really don't like a target man centre forward. I want us to get a centre forward who is pacey and a great shot taker, combined with left wing, right wing. Matthias Tell at Bayern Munich would be a dream choice. He's doing well at Bayern, coming up there, and a young player as well, one to keep an eye on. But why would they sell? They might see him as the future of replacing Harry Kane, of course, maybe in the long term. So I don't know why they would sell at all. Steve Stone, who, by the way, Steve, it was an absolute pleasure to see you at the Liverpool game, mate, and I appreciated the adorning of the TGT hat that you took with you as well. Steve says, with the tightening of financial constraints, do you feel it could devalue the market? It's a good question. Will teams now be expecting to spend less money? Well, the thing is, the profit and sustainability is a Premier League thing. So clubs outside of the Premier League will be turning around and saying, well, we're not any, other than FFP, of course, we're not under any specific league unless there is a different rule for a different league. We're not under the profit and sustainability rules. So we don't care that you work under these. We expect you to still pay the money that we expect Premier League clubs to pay for our players. So it's a really good question, though, because there's an argument you could say, yes, it will maybe within the Premier League do that. But there's an argument as well that because it's a Premier League specific rule, that it won't on the wider aspect of football transfers. So, yeah, very, very interesting question. I guess time will tell, Steve. But I'm really glad you raised that because it's a really important point. Stuart says, Tom, do you think that we have any chance at all of getting Mbappe now we're back in the Champions League? And the answer, Stuart, I think is sadly no, because the finances involved with the what's the words, kind of the wages and the signing on fees and all of those things combined are really, really difficult to get around. Sadly, we're in a situation where the Premier League always will have big wages for the likes of Man City and Liverpool, but I mean, even less so Liverpool, I guess. But Arsenal, our wage structure has been gradually rising. We've got Saka on, a base wage of below 200k, but obviously bonuses can take that to a very high figure. You've got Kai Havertz, whose wages were doubled from when he was at Chelsea. You've got Thomas Partey on big money, Jesus on big money. Martinelli's wage has gone up significantly. Ben White's new contract will see his wage go up, and he's already on a six-figure salary, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think if you look on Spot Rack, I think it is. And you've got other players, of course. Declan Rice will be on a really big salary as well. So the Mbappe wage, you're looking at $1 million. I think it's something like $1 million a week. And so that just utterly blows everything that we've done. And so it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to see an Mbappe wage offer ever being made by Arsenal. So, yeah, Stuart, sadly, it's difficult. And Tenet says, how can Tottenham have a higher revenue than Arsenal? I thought Arsenal have bigger fan bases and are a bigger club. It's extremely laughable. I don't know about revenue. Premier League revenue table. Let's have a quick look. What I will say is obviously Spurs have been in the Champions League for a number of years, which has certainly helped their revenue in comparison to ours. If I have a quick look at this, is meant to be the Deloitte Money League, and hopefully it tells us which clubs and where they rank. I'm hoping it will give me a table. So Arsenal, so Arsenal are 10th, Spurs are 9th in terms of revenue. Spurs' revenue is between 2018 and 2022, which is when we last have it. 523 million euros, 442 million pounds. Arsenal, £367 million. And that comes from both clubs and their situations of Spurs are in the Champions League for a number of years when we weren't. They were finishing higher than us in the Premier League table. So, yeah, the answer is they have a bigger revenue than us and have had a bigger revenue than us because they've been finishing above us and because they've been in the Champions League, Anthony. So that's why they have a bigger and have had a bigger revenue than us recently. That will now change, we hope. We obviously finished above them last season by quite some distance. They're not in European competition this season. They went out of the League Cup at the first time of asking. They obviously have Man City in the next round of the FA Cup as well. They are fighting for Champions League, but they sold Harry Kane, which got them a lot of money through player sales as well to Bayern Munich. So yes, they have a higher revenue than us, but there are certainly explanations beyond the fact that we have a bigger fan base and are a quote unquote bigger club than them. But at the moment, their revenue over the past three, from 2019 to 2022, certainly was. And their new stadium gives them greater revenue as well, in some ways, as Flow Show says in the chat box. So that certainly adds to it. But it's nothing to do about how big your fan base, how big your club is. Revenue comes down to things totally disattached from that. Well, not totally disattached, because certainly the revenue from fans and things like that changes things. But yeah, competitivity, the competitions you're in, how far you go in them, where you finish in the league, that changes the revenue of the clubs. So there you go. Rob says, surely FFP must at some point slow/tighten in the market. In theory, there'll be less money available in the transfer window, at least averaged over 3 years. Tightening of the FFP or the slowing of FFP, they're two different things, I guess. If FFP slows, I think that we're going to be in a very, very difficult position with Man City being released to do whatever they want again in the market and spending huge sums, and Chelsea as well. I don't want FFP or the profit and sustainability to slow down. I want it to remain consistent. I want the clubs to have to work within these confines because I think it will make things more competitive in the long run. It will depend on who is the smartest at making decisions. Arsenal haven't been perfect, and there's still the jury out on players like Kai Havertz, So we have to admit that. But we have been smart in some of the other areas that we've spent money, like Tomiyasu's deal that was like 20 million quid. Great move. We've got a great player for that. Zinchenko was 30 million, Ødegaard 30 million. We've done some good bits of business. 38 million for Timber. I think that will prove to be a very good deal for us as well, barring, of course, the possibility of the injury as well. E6, I'm going to thumbs down until you admit that Kai was a waste of money. That's a shame. I would never thumbs down on something just because someone has a different point of view to you. And in the case of where I'm at with Kai Havertz, the jury's out for me. As I said before, I will be making my judgment when I think that there's a better or more appropriate time to make that judgment. The end of the season is when I'm going to make judgments about this season. And so I suppose E6, you're going to be thumbsing down until the end of the season at least, which is a shame because I certainly wouldn't be disliking things just because someone holds a different opinion or is holding off on an opinion at the moment until they get more evidence and more information through. So, but you're entitled to do what you want, mate. Kish says every club is impacted by FFP. It makes it interesting on who suddenly can become available as clubs need to manage this and their books as well. Ronald says, if Mbappe goes to Madrid, would you go for Vinicius Jr.? I don't think so. I think Mbappe would just become their new striker, wouldn't he? So you'd have Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Mbappe as a front three, I suppose, with Bellingham playing behind them. That's an unbelievable option, isn't it? That's an incredible amount of talent, you have to admit. Right, we're going to end the show there. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Very much appreciated. As I said, I'm going to talk to you about some situations on Monday where I can talk to you about a bit more. It will be a shorter show, though, on Monday because I'll be off and into London that day. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you for continuing to show support on the channel, especially, of course, through, as I've been mentioning, for a number of weeks and the last couple of months, what has been a pretty difficult period of time. So thank you. But things are on the up now. Things are improving, and you guys have been a massive, massive part of that. So thank you. And as I always maintain, we have the best community here. Steve was telling me a great story who I said I met at Liverpool. About what someone in our community did for him. And it was great to hear that. I often hear stories about people meeting up from this community to watch games with one another and have never met before and only met across this community, and I look forward to meeting as many people as possible in the coming weeks and months as well that love and enjoy the channel. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for the support that you always bring to me and each other. So drop a like, subscribe, and I'll be back, of course, tomorrow morning for another show, talking about everything that happens in the next 24 hours in the world of Arsenal. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and as always, up the Arsenal.